Welcome everyone to this awareness podcast. I am Cyndi Krupp. I get to be the host of the Living in Oneness experience, and I've been having a blast with everyone that's come to speak to me during these podcasts. I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm I just got a little emotional, so I'm gonna take a breath. I am really delighted and I feel really blessed to be having this conversation with my guest, Jeff Bailey. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Cyndi. Thank you.
So it's just a quick introduction because I'm going to let you give your own bio, your own what you want people to know about you. Jeff and I met probably about a year and a half ago. He's been a speaker / yoga instructor at all the Pure Presence conferences, or at least the last 3 or 4. And I met him when I was asked to do a Facebook Live with him to help introduce everybody to who he is and what he's offering. And then I was blessed to play host to make sure that the experience of his yoga practice worked for everyone that showed up. Something inside of me lit up and opened up and melted even before I knew what his practice was about. And pretty much since March of 2021, so about a year and a half ago, I've been spending about an hour with Jeff and his teachings. He hasn't been spending an hour with me, but I've been spending about an hour, give or take, pretty much every day for about a year and a half. So I was just estimating, I've listened to about 500 hours of Jeff's teaching and pointings, which is probably more than I've spent time with any other teacher ever. Wow. Which is pretty extraordinary. So Jeff's yoga is phenomenal, but that's not why I asked him to come to talk to us. It's literally about how we use these basic teachings that color his yoga instruction, how it's been shifting and changing how I view life. So, Jeff, we talked a little bit about the pointings that we're going to talk about, but I want to invite you to tell people who and what you are and anything else you want to tell them about what led you to this very moment.
Oh, yeah, that's the key right there, is what leads to this very moment. And when you first mentioned that you wanted me to share a little bit about my background and my bio, one of the things that popped into my head are these moments in my past, specifically the times, the years following my graduation from college, and how people would say, you know, where have you been? What are you going to do with your life? And there was always this feeling of inadequacy. Like, geez, I just went through 4 years of college and I don't know what I want to do. And then years would go by. I mean, into my late 20s, that feeling haunted me in the background quite a bit, because I couldn't find purpose in my life. I couldn't find purpose in the world. And I kept falling back on things that I just enjoyed to do. I enjoyed working with groups of people, and I had skills in outdoor settings. I worked for Outward Bound for a while. I led bicycle tours all over New England for a while. And I kept kind of settling for things that just made me happy. And nevertheless, this feeling of inadequacy, and I just wasn't fitting in. And then when I was about 29 years old, well, I should back up a tiny bit and just say I did discover yoga at the age of 22 in my hometown of Gunnison, Colorado. And I can't tell you how I ended up in that room. I just ended up in this room, and that was a life-changing moment. And so yoga kind of gave me this renewed sense of purpose. I like in a way, a false sense of purpose, because it put use on my body. It gave my body something purposeful to do. And we know now that purpose can't be found in the body. It can't be found in the world. And so it was at the age of about 29 when I'm doing yoga. I mean, yoga was always there as this backdrop, doing yoga on the floor in this house that I'd rented with a couple people that I was just getting to know. And I looked up on the shelf, and there's A Course in Miracles. And wow, what is that? And I just pulled it off the shelf and opened it up. And that was just a life-changing moment where this question that I had asked, what does it mean to join? Because yoga joins, that's the word yoga in Sanskrit means to join or yoke together. I had no clue what that meant, but I did keep asking it. It was one of those questions that if we just keep asking a life riddle like that, the answer will be given. And so the course came in, and all of a sudden my life started to change, and I started to find deeper purpose, and one thing led to another. And yoga evolved as I studied Rolfing. I was a Rolfer for a while, and which is a form of body work that helps people be more comfortable in their bodies. And so all these things started coming together. And just circling back to this idea of inadequacy and finding a deeper purpose that begins to dispel that feeling altogether is the yoga of a lifetime. And how now I can look back and see that every single thing, some of the things that I felt inadequate about or felt weren't sufficient or up to speed for who I was supposed to be, those things, and maybe I could say even especially those things, were absolutely perfect, because now I can look back and see that there were no accidents, and everything is exactly what you just said a moment ago. Perfect, because it brings us to this peaceful and happy and joyous healing moment. And I know you know what I mean when I say that.
Yeah. So Avita Yoga is not like any other yoga practice I've moved in and out of before, and I'm not going to ask you to try to describe it. There are three, and other than to say, there's a link that you can access if at the end of this conversation you want to learn more about Jeff's work. And he and I live, 1,000 miles apart or something. I do all of the work with him on his online studio, which is extraordinarily easy to access. There were three concepts that help both in the body work of the yoga that I do with you, but even more importantly, that bleed out into my 24/7 spiritual practice. Let's put it that way. And I'm gonna let's see. I told you the three, but now I'm thinking that we might discuss them in a different order. The first one that's coming up for me right now relates to letting go of worldly goals. Like in the yoga practice, you often talk about how we're not about moving into a certain shape and having the body look the same way. And somehow that teaching for me is just reminding me about remembering what my ultimate goal is, whether it's to join or to know the truth. And I'm using the body and I'm using this moment to get there, not to achieve a certain income or have my name be known or to move my body into a certain shape. I would love to hear your insights and how that colors your experience and colors your practice and colors how you work with people.
Oh man, it's so beautiful. It's such a really broad and deep topic, and I'm glad we're addressing it first because there's so much I could say about it. I guess I'll start with with the Yoga Sutras. There are over 200 Yoga Sutras, and that the core essence of all those sutras lies in the very first one, Sutra 1.1. Now is the practice of yoga. And now is the key word, N-O-W. And the Course tells us, from A Course in Miracles, it says, now is the only time there is. Or there's lots of references to the undoing of time in the Course. But another one that we've all heard is now is the closest approximation to eternity, eternal love, which is true self. And then, and so then we have Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. So now is everything. And we can begin to get a glimmer of that if we let that become a bit of a mantra. Now is everything. Now is the only time there is. Now is our healing. The moment we begin to plan, or the moment, let's use yoga specifically here, the moment I begin to plan or anticipate advancing my shape, I call them shapes, the rest of the world calls them yoga postures, which in and of itself is kind of a loaded word. The word posture itself suggests some sort of performance. And if we go online, we just type in the word yoga or yoga posture or something like that. You'll see loads of images of people demonstrating their flexibility, oftentimes in some beautiful setting. But even there, the idea is that I have to advance the shape. There's something egoically appealing to get the body into a certain shape. And yoga is universal. It's not just for the young and the able-bodied. Yoga at its core must be available for someone who is in their final week of life, who I really think oftentimes about a person who might be restricted to bed and not even able to move their body. Because yoga for thousands and thousands of years has always been about the mind. And it's only in the last 60, 70 years that it has been popularized by pushing it into the body, which is what the ego loves to do. So, how do we take this concept, or not even a concept, how do we take this truth that now is where healing happens? It's where all joy and peace will and can be found, is in now-ness, which is not a slice of time. It's a state of mind that leads us out of time. And actually, because time and space are so intricately connected, dependent on each other, it ultimately leads us out of form as well. So to our truth and reality as spirit. So doesn't it make sense that as I join with my healed self in this present moment, that I slip beyond my body. We must slip beyond our bodies to find true self and to heal. I co-authored a book with my good friend Jean Langlois, and he gave me this axiom that just so beautiful that I sometimes share. And his axiom is practice willingly. I just have to practice willingly. Don't make it real. And above all, don't be afraid of it. And so I use that as a stepping stone. Oh, it's participate willingly. Participate in life willingly. Don't make it real. And above all, don't be afraid of it. So that's how we can take this healing power of nowness and let it find its way through our bodies. And by participating willingly, I just put one foot in front of the other, and I let everything that I encounter show me the way to the love and the light by not making it real and not being afraid of it. It's such a beautiful and simple practice. So now that we can set the stage there for that, the power of now, and we can establish that healing happens in spirit, it happens in mind, and we let it come through us. Now, how do we use the body? Well, let's put the body in a shape, a doable, practical shape. Let's make it a really simple one. Let's just imagine you're lying on your back, your knees are bent, your feet are on the floor, your head is on a firm pillow or cushion, and you bring your knee to your shoulder. Your knee is bent, you interlock your fingers around your knee, and you slowly, thoughtfully guide your knee towards your right shoulder. Well, what comes up as you do that? More often than not, there's a little resistance in the hip. There's a little pinching sensation. There's a little stiffness. There's a little stretch in the back of the hip. That resistance or that restriction is perfectly analogous to the limits the ego imposes on spirit, on our truth. I love the quote from Rumi. He says, "Seek not for love, but seek, find, and remove the barriers to love," which is almost a verbatim quote out of A Course in Miracles as well. It's a timeless idea to remove the obstacles to truth, which it happens to be Yoga Sutra number 2. Basically, it says, identify the blockages and identify the blockages to your healed mind and remove them. I'm paraphrasing. And then Sutra number 3 is, and your natural true self will be known. So you could summarize the entire spiritual practice in the first 3 sutras. And then the rest just go on to elaborate on them. But now, back to the shape. You're lying on the floor, your knees to your chest, and you start to feel this restriction in the hip, which is perfectly analogous to the limits we impose on our true self. And 99 times out of 100, we're unaware of them. So the shape that we're doing, knee to chest, brings this blockage to the awareness, to the light of the awareness of our mind, where we get to participate willingly, we don't make it real, and we're not afraid of it. Because the ego wants us to be afraid of our pains. It wants us to just quickly avoid them or quickly remedy them, which is why we have so many quick fixes that always include outer circumstances or outer remedies. And it's not that they're wrong. Sometimes they're very, very helpful. But ultimately, we want to find our way inside, so we can go inside the body and we can find the restriction. And this is the miracle, is that when we spend time with the blockage in the body, whether it's in the shoulder, an elbow, your neck, your back, your knee, your hip, when we spend time with it and put it under what I call healing sensation, we add just the right amount of pressure to it. It's not stretching, it's healing compression. The inner body's physiology has a way of just cleaning it up and restoring it.
So
it's so simple. Yeah, please.
I'm gonna move backwards from what I told you, because one of the things that have happened within this practice and in my life is this sense of slowing down. In some ways, I could tell you, I was able to move my neck, or in the practice, I moved my neck a lot further a year and a half ago than I do today. Sometimes, ultimately, because, and I've heard it spoken in so many different ways, but I think you call them speed bumps within the practice.
Yeah.
In my head, I call them hiccups. And what I notice, because there are things that are going on in all of our bodies, but as it was an unfolding, just because I accept the teachings that I immersed myself in, doesn't mean the body has, doesn't mean my conditioning had. And I became more and more aware as I spend the hour a day in this practice and the other things that I do, that even though I say I'm not outwardly focused, I could still see the tendency for goal setting and goal achievement. And, I am like, even though we say we're not going to do that, all that stuff still comes up. But as I continue to give my willingness every day, I've watched the process essentially slow things down. And when you slow down enough and you let go of an outward worldly goal, there's an infinite number of little hiccups, speed bumps, areas of interest. This morning, in another meditation, not my yoga, I saw them as water crystals. Thoughts becoming water crystals that are creating little, hiccups or resistances to a thought process or being at peace in this moment. And your practice points to that. And so if we ease on from letting go of outward goals and we're moving further and further inside, I would love for you to point to this idea of what we find when we slow down and start being with what's inside.
Yeah. Well, it's, it's it's a beautiful metaphor. When we come into the shape, as you know, Cyndi, you bump into the resistance, and sometimes you could go right past them to deepen into the shape and advance the shape, which is a very common worldly goal. I just want to get my body deeper into the shape and make it look good. But it's skipping steps, it's shortcutting, and there's always a cost to shortcutting. And so you'll hear me say over and over again, slow down, let's go slow. Feel into the very first bit of resistance, slow down for the speed bumps. That's what we're supposed to do, right? When we're driving down the road, we're supposed to slow down for them, but we slow down hesitantly, or we try to go around them and get over them as fast as we can. And so it's a beautiful thing to literally slow down for that. And that's how this healing physiology kicks into the body. And then we start to honestly look at the things in our lives that we want to skip over. And everything is just pointing toward this truth. If we can start to look at things as they are and slow down enough to really accept them, then the light starts to come through. We give these things a little time to be undone. I guess that might be true patience, is giving your life a little time to let the blockages and the sorrows and the grievances be undone, instead of just pushing into another temporary fulfilling situation. Spending time with that. Slowing down. Slowing down could be our most productive moments, in fact, because it saves time. It's so ironic. We stop the hurry, slow down, solve and undo the blockage to freedom, then the love and the guidance and the light comes through. And that becomes the goal. That becomes the unwinding, instead of the pursuit of a yoga body, or back to the 80s and 90s, where everybody wanted to have a hard body. And a hard body is just a reflection of hard thoughts. And so it's just taking some time and repurposing a practice the way Avita does, to let this unwinding be really quite a joyful and pleasant process. And once you get a taste of it, you just want more.
Yeah, well, part of it in slowing down and merging with a lot of different things coming to me, it feels like a gentle, radical honesty. That's the words that are coming up, whether it's my getting still on the floor and moving my body so I don't run past that little like burr or something in the neck or the hip, and hang out with there and deepen into the sensitivity, or I get real still when something in the world seems to have made an upset, however subtle inside. I don't pretend it's not there, or pretend I am at peace when I'm not. That's one of the things that in general have been looking at a lot. It's not that who I am in the eternal now, is always at peace, right? But there are these things that the body holds, that the thoughts and the emotions hold. I often, as I slow down in your practice, and I slow down in my contemplations and in my experience of life in general, the slower I go, the more I can watch this inner world respond in ways that I hadn't even noticed before. And even in moving, I still don't, I don't try to understand it, but I'll move into shapes and move slowly into shapes, and emotions and memories and all sorts of things will sort of just like they're flowing out of my ribs. But not if I go fast, not if I bypass to get to the shape.
Yes. Yeah. And so much of what we do, this sort of fast-paced life and fast-paced fitness programs and fast-paced yoga and sweaty this and sweaty that, it can feel good and feel kind of therapeutic in the moment, but it doesn't let us go deep enough. There's a reason why, I guess for thousands and thousands of years, just sitting in a shape, just sitting still can be quite a powerful practice. Why? Well, we got to sit with this body, and I got to sit with my thoughts. Cyndi, I heard a statistic not long ago of this big percentage of youth these days. When they asked them, why are you drawn to videos, and why are you drawn to, shorter and shorter videos and things like that? video games, the answer was because I'm afraid of my thoughts. And so we have a large population that it seems, well, at least they're being honest. I'm afraid of my thoughts. And I think the honesty that you were talking about a moment ago is exactly what's needed. It's an important part of the process to just stop for a moment and honestly say, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of my thoughts. Why does this feeling of inadequacy and lack keep coming in? And then the faster I go and the more I push, the more that I can seem to keep some distance between me and that feeling of inadequacy or lack or depression or sadness. And so I your testimony and my testimony and the testimony of countless others in this practice and many other spiritual paths, I bet you every single one who's made some real progress has said just what you did. I was honest with myself just long enough to say, hey, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of running from this invisible thing that seems to haunt me from the inside. Sometimes it seems like it's coming from the outside too, I suppose. Like the world is encroaching and I'm not keeping up with it. But if we can sit or even slow down a tiny bit and be really honest and say, tired of running. I want a better way. I just want a better way. And that alone is a deep prayer that will be answered.
All right, so we're going to move into the third topic, which actually colored the title of our podcast, Living on the Edge.
Okay.
Michael Singer taught me quite some time ago that the first step when you're really ready for healing is to let go of your fear and let go of your fear of pain. And so a lot of what I've been doing in my life and in this practice is moving slow enough, whether it's in my movements or in my contemplations or in watching my thoughts, to find that area that creates what you call it healing sensation. Many of us still call it pain. Pain that doesn't, and when you move slow enough and you get to that edge where there's something there, and man, all of a sudden there's this pain or resistance or anger. Sometimes anger comes up, frustration, whatever, but you hang right on that edge. The way you say it, there can be pain or sensation. I think you don't like to use that term, pain, that doesn't take your peace away. I think I've heard you say that only a couple thousand.
Yeah.
But not being afraid of that. That's such a great way to live one's life, isn't it?
Amazing. Yeah. It's funny. I had a student in class one time I was teaching, and I use the word healing sensation a lot. And I'll say, getting clarity on what healing sensation is the only skill. It's the only skill that we develop in this practice. It's never about getting better at the shape, because it is not necessary to get better at the shape in order to feel better and heal. But I'm teaching this class one day and probably used the word healing sensation several times. And one of the students, this guy, blurts out, he says, enough with the euphemisms, Jeff, I'm in pain. And so it got a big laugh. He said, this is painful, and got a big laugh. And I said, yes, but you are there willingly. I'm not pushing you into it, you know. And he even said it with a little bit of laughter in his voice. So I knew, he knew, the whole classroom knew it wasn't outright pain. It wasn't like fingers on a chalkboard, irritating, just pain that separates, and healing sensation joins. And I will say, I oftentimes say, healing sensation can be a bit intense, but there's always a nurturing aspect to it. And it will never take your peace away. In fact, it leads you toward your peaceful self. We're just using the body and its blockages to resolve them and bring up emotions, bring up thoughts, bring up whatever comes up, hold it to the light, ask for help, let it dissolve. We just get closer and closer to true self, more peace and more happiness. And I suppose it all boils down to the gentle willingness, you know, participate willingly, show up in this body, don't be afraid of it, don't make it real, and don't be afraid of it. And it sounds scary, and people will find all kinds of excuses to not dip their toe into the willing discovery of what's holding us back from the love and the light.
The freedom that comes from letting go of our fear of sensation, pain, fear itself.
Yeah, it's like we've all had dreams, nightly dreams, where we're running from something, maybe a monster or maybe a situation that we're running from it. And it's scary. It's certainly not pleasant. But the one sure thing that would resolve that dream in that moment would be if that dream character, which is usually us doing the running, were to begin to slow down and stop and look back and say, wait a minute, what's chasing me? What am I running from? Oh, wait a minute, I just made all that up. The character doing the running was made up by the same mind who made up the chaser and made up all the situations that the character might be running from or afraid of. That moment is that honest moment of slowing down and willingly coming into that edge. And it's not the edge of a precipice. It's not the edge. It's not a scary edge. It's an edge where we're able to look and see the truth. It slows down enough to where the chasee and the chaser begin to realize they're one and the same. And then we realize how much power we have to undo that all. And it just takes willingness, a little time. And it helps to ask for some help. You just look up, feel up, and ask for help. Ask love for help. Ask light for help. And that would be analogous to that dream character looking up and say, hey, mind, hey, you, let's turn this thing around. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of the pain.
Funny, I was just listening to you now. All I kept seeing was a dog chasing its tail.
There you go. Yeah.
So I have a beautiful picture just just these three concepts that that I immerse myself in every time I sit for your practice, but I also immerse myself in really in the living in oneness experience and the other teachers that light me up. One of the things that I've learned, learn's not the right word, that I'm experiencing more and more is that the teaching is all the same, right? And the teaching, the invitation is so simple. So, and I laughed because my experience with the course as I opened it up, I read, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, therein lies the peace of God. Yep, I accept that, and I closed the book for a dozen years, right? But in general, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, therein lies the peace of God. If somehow we keep as the backdrop that we are, when we stop pretending we're something else, we are this peace of God, or we are consciousness, or we are stillness, we are truth, whatever the word is. From that standpoint, my experience with the truth teachings and the way they're expressed through your work amounts to accept that all is well. And from that place, we get to use this body and the shapes and the instructions to slow down, pay attention to the experience inside as we use our focus to move the body in certain ways. We, remember there's no outer worldly goal. The goal is to know the truth of who we are, which is an inside job. B, understands that these limitations are hidden. If they weren't hidden, anyone that's listening now would have said, yep, don't want that long ago, because we're all on this path of discovery. So they're hidden in subtle ways. So when we slow down for the speed bumps, for those slow down and watch our inner landscape, we can find what's hidden, because there's nothing really hidden in truth. And 3, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, therein lies the peace of God. Acceptance of that requires the acceptance that fear, defined as the opposite of love, and pain as a constriction and an unacceptance of what is, are all just pointers to where we're not being truthful. And so when we, with our awareness and our acceptance that all is well, come to pain or sensation or fear and hang out there, there can be no choice. But in the eternal now, that pain has to dissolve. There can be no alternative. Yeah. How does that sit with your philosophy? Am I a good student, Jeff?
Beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yes. The word that really struck me that you used there a moment ago, Cyndi, was pointers. That everything, every single solitary thing in our experience points either towards separation or to our joined unity as one love. That's why yoga joins. Yoga for thousands of years has been a process of uniting with the one true self, where all is good, all is healed, all is one. So as we walk through the dream of separation, it's our yoga to join. And how do we do that? But to look for the pointers. They're all pointing in one direction or the other. They're all pointing towards separation, and they're either all going to point toward my false concept of lack and limitation and loss and loneliness and fear. Or see how easy it is? I mean, just go sit in a coffee shop sometime and order a cup of coffee and sit there and just listen to the words around you. Listen to the you can kind of just eavesdrop on the whole thing, and you'll just get bits and pieces. But it's almost always a conversation where there is blame and attack and some degree of victim or victimization. And so that's a real simple example of how we tend to fortify the dream and fortify our separation. Whereas when we start to say, wait a minute, I want a better way, we start to do the inner work and we start to say, no, that sign, I'm not going to turn that way. And so the signs start to point only to the better way. Here's a good example. If we're all honest, and I'll speak personally here, if I'm honest about every injury I've had several key injuries, a severe knee injury, a severe hip injury, and a pretty severe neck injury, and then lots of little stuff in between, right? From the ego's perspective, those injuries are purposeless. We get mad at them and we get mad at ourselves and we look back on the situation, say, if only I would have done such and such differently. And then when I went to the doctor to get it fixed, they didn't do it right. And so then I just see how an injury perpetuates the blame game. But if I slow down, see, those injuries were just giant speed bumps and we don't want to slow down for them. But if I slow down, now I can repurpose and I can go, wait a minute, that knee injury was exactly what turned me into, it turned me onto the world of Rolfing, which is a modality of using my hands. It's a form of body work, but it wasn't just to push me into a new profession. It was to push me or move me toward my healed self. And so that training just introduced a whole new way of seeing the body through my mind. The hip injury was one of the key things that I couldn't solve it through physical therapy, but it was in deep prayer that I began to ask for that answer. And voila, this whole different way of approaching the body and using pressure and compression instead of stretching and strengthening that dawned on me. And so quite simply, we could say that injuries are the ego's way of maintaining pain and separation. Injuries are the spirit's way of getting our attention and saying, wait a minute, if you're not going to slow down, we'll find a way to slow you down. And we can start to be so grateful for every injury and every seeming mishap because it points us in the right direction. Do I have time for one quick story here?
Sure.
I just finished a 4-day retreat here in Minnesota at our new Avita retreat center. And one of the students that came was in the teacher training program. And she, at the end of the teacher training program, she had decided that she was going to go ahead and have a knee replacement because, you know, that's a big decision to make. And there's lots of things we can do in the practice to delay or avoid those kinds of things. But she decided it was in her destiny and it's what she wanted. So she did it. And now it's been 6 weeks and she came to this retreat. And right away, she started telling this story about her knee and the decision to get the replacement. And she began to weep and tears began to flow. And what really started to come through was after 36 years of marriage, her husband, who she had judged as not being a spiritual person, and she had all this judgment and even, I would say, resentment toward him because he wasn't really living up to her spiritual standards. She was required to slow down. Knee replacement will slow you down. And while you go through the rehab and all that. And so she was just weeping. Tears were flowing down her face because, see, I'm getting choked up here because her husband she was in a situation where she finally, after 36 years, allowed her husband to truly care for her. How healing that injury was. And and that whole idea just kept deepening and deepening over the days we were here. And now she's eternally grateful for that. And she doesn't care now if her knee replacement, if it doesn't get 100% of the movements it's supposed to, and all that, she doesn't care, because now she realized what it was truly for, and so I would just invite anyone listening to this to look back and start to develop a little bit of gratitude and appreciation for everything, and even those things that we seem to upset us. If we repurpose them, they're all pointing us to the love and light, and that's where just the beauty comes through, and happiness and peace just flows, and we're truly cared for.
Can't believe we've been talking for almost an hour. That's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And just I have nothing but gratitude for this time together. I feel like the world has shifted. Gratitude to you for these really simple but so potent, that's a word you like to use, I know, potent, messages for how to live our life, just inwardly focused. and know that the outer is a gift to heal us inside, and slow down for the speed bumps, and don't be afraid to hang out on the edge. Jeff, so grateful. Thank you for being here. Thank you to everyone that's spending time with this episode of the Living in Oneness podcast, which is a part of the weekly awareness podcast. Wherever you are right now, leave us comments, share with your friends, dip your feet into all of the other podcasts that are available from the awareness podcast. We're here. This is here because of your asking, and just know that we love you. We love us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Cyndi. Nothing but love.
Yeah. Bye-bye.